Hello everyone, my name is Carl Lehman. I'm from Dream It, Planet Live It, easy for me to say. I'm joined today by the fantastic Ed Akay. And rather than me introduce Ed, Ed, would you like to introduce yourself, how we got to know one another and a little bit about your background?
Of course, Carl. Hi everyone, my name's Ed Akay. I'm a property entrepreneur and networking host. Now, I initially met Carl in the summer of last year when I went to his fantastic networking event. It turns out that we shared, shall we say, similar concerns about certain things in property. And we sort of bonded from there. He spoke at my event back in January. The audience either loved him or they found him a little bit questionable, but I like that because what you see with Carl is what you get. In particular, he shared an ethos I actually agree with as well, although I'm by no means an expert at it, the importance of having a varied investment portfolio. Not everyone agreed with it, Carl, as you probably know, but those that did really appreciated it. I'll give you a little bit about my background. I initially studied politics and social policy at university. Carl will probably tell you I bang on about politics a lot, so I apologise if I bore anyone. I then subsequently studied law, and I entered the property world as an investor, where I invested in a cooperative that built luxury flats on the outskirts of Ankara in Turkey. Now, the English pronunciation of my surname, Akay, or AK, whatever way you want to call it, is pronounced a bit differently in Turkey. It's actually pronounced as Akay. And yeah, I'm half Turkish. I then did renovations in Northern England. I started property deal sourcing, and that's where you effectively find properties for investors tailored to what they want. I then started doing development in the south of England, where I started getting planning permission on very, very challenging sites. More about that later on. And I started being a networking event host. There's a bit of a story behind that, which I'm sure I'll be able to tell later if you so let me.
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. I'm all a big fan about people understanding about the real person and that kind of authenticity. So I've got a couple of quick questions for you. So number one, what's your burning desire, Ed?
Well, my burning desire at the moment is to build our wonderful networking event, the Torbay Property Meet. And I'll tell you why that is. I did quite a bit of public speaking in my time, and I thought, you know what, if I can speak in public, stand on a stage, I can run a networking event. So I founded, if you like, a precursor event to it. And I founded that event because a lot of networking events were being used as fronts to sell courses. Right. And I found that annoyed a lot of people. So I thought, you know what, start my own networking event. And I did with my wonderful business partner, Mel Richards, who you obviously know. In fact, I think it was her who introduced me to your event.
Absolutely.
And our desire is to grow that. Second desire is this. We've recently formed a company called Gold Lake Holdings with a guy called John Thomas, who is the former managing director of Rolls-Royce. And that is to open doors for us to do bigger developments and ultimately learn from John's knowledge. He's got a lot of really, really good ethics as well. He's actually going to be giving a talk about property ethics at our next networking event.
That's an interesting one.
You get a complimentary ticket to, Carl.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for that. And I think it's really great that people kind of, see the whites of our eyes, as it were, and, can get to learn a little bit more about who we are and what we do. So tell us a little bit more about the Torbay Property Meeting. I mean, I have to say, I've been to a number of property events over the years. And I found the audience there were very genuine. They were very lovely people. Why wouldn't they be? We're in Devon. But tell us a little bit more about that Torbay Property Meeting and what you're aiming to do there.
Sure. Well, it initially started when I said to my business partner, Mel, who at the time actually wasn't officially my business partner, she was my joint venture partner. We got to know each other via joint venturing on a few things together.
Right.
And I said to Mel, you know what, we're in Torbay a lot. There's no property networking event here. Let's form our own. So what did we do? We found this pretty obscure hotel. Well, to be honest, Mel found it initially, and we said to them, let us have one of your rooms for free. and then we'll make sure our attendees buy drinks. So it was initially called the Torbay Free Property Meet.
Right.
The event proved very popular, Carl, because we had a rule that you're not allowed to sell property training courses at our event.
Interesting.
And and it was because what we found is that more serious investors do not like someone standing at the front telling them you need to spend X amount of money to become successful in property. That annoyed a lot of successful investors. So we thought, do you know what? We'll do our own version, where we don't allow that. So the event grew, and we thought, let's upgrade it. So we're now at the Imperial Hotel Torquay.
Which is a fantastic location, isn't it?
Absolutely beautiful, Carl. And you know, Mel, she's amazing with people. You know, you cannot dislike Mel, pretty much. Is that fair?
Oh, she's wonderful. Yeah, it's a lovely lady.
Yeah, well, she got on board and sponsor. She's fantastic at networking. You know, I'm more of sort of a stand at the front and talk person, but Mel's more of a natural networker than myself, I always think. And then we got on speakers from around the country. We obviously had yourself, an expert in your field, you know, and one of the top IFAs in the country. You know, you've been in the Times on, you know, countless occasions. We've also had a fitness influencer from the north of England. You know, we talked about things that people in property might be interested in, such as finances, such as fitness.
Sure.
And we've had some of the UK's top property developers, a guy called Evan Main-Donald. If you Google Evan Main-Donald, he's very, very well known on the development circuit. And people find it quite interesting because in the Southwest, you have Exeter as the very wealthy city. You have Plymouth, which is sort of catching up with Exeter, but it's obviously not as well known. And then you have Torbay, and in particular Torquay, which is also almost viewed as the third one. And we thought, let's get Torquay on the map. Let's get it on the map in the property world. And that's what we're aiming to do. But most importantly, we just want to build a great community where people help each other, where the ethos is about doing business via property, not about selling training courses. It is what it says, and it's a property meet with no agenda.
I thought it was great. The atmosphere was, you know, brilliant. There was a number of people that I've made connections with, and we've got conversations going now as a consequence of that, and some really good quality people. You mentioned training courses, and I'm just going to touch on that slightly because I think over the you know, the last sort of decade, probably there's been this kind of sort of move of thinking that property is the kind of panacea for all ills when it comes to financial freedom. There's a lot of people out there banging the drum about sort of financial freedom. Now, you'll know from the talk that I gave, I talk about true financial freedom. So in my world, you know, having, you know, £1 million property portfolio and £950,000 worth of debt is not true financial freedom. That's just a highly geared investment. But actually, I'm just curious, as somebody who works and lives and breathes in the property sort of field, what's your take on all of these property training gurus ethos out there? I'm just curious.
Okay, well, first of all, I did co-found my own property meet because I got sick of them, for want of a better word. But joking aside, I want to make this very, very clear. I'm not actually against property training, but what I am very strongly against is what you might call dream selling, i.e. selling people a dream of financial freedom in inverted commas.
Yeah.
And what often happens is they don't qualify who goes on their courses. They don't check whether that person is suitable to get into property personality-wise, whether they're in the right financial condition to get into property. And sometimes they give advice by saying, oh yeah, you just get out a load of credit cards and buy our course or whatever, and you can become financially free. And that for me isn't right. No. I also want to say as well, I obviously can't give financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. So I'll leave that to you, Carl. But I will say is this: obviously consult with professionals before you make any sort of investment, whether property, whether stocks and shares. And then you will get an informed professional opinion on whatever investment you make. Also about property training as well. they oversimplify it. They oversimplify, not all of them, but some of them do. They oversimplify very complex strategies. I'll
Right.
give an example. There is a strategy known as rent to rent. Don't know if you've heard of it, Carl.
I have, yeah. Many of the viewers, I'm sure, haven't. So, can you give us a few seconds on that?
Yeah, of course. Well, rent to rent is basically, the principle is you find a landlord who is sick of being a landlord.
Right.
You say to them, I'll rent your property off you for a guaranteed amount on the condition I can let it back to my own tenants. So you could say it's a version of subletting under a bit of a posher name.
Okay.
And that is being taught on training courses a lot, but it's often taught about the pitfalls. You effectively become a letting agent, as you can probably tell by effectively letting out. You are a letting agent, very much so. They tell it to inexperienced people who have had no experience of being a letting agent. There's a lot of legislation to comply with, and if you're a property newbie, is it really wise giving them a strategy that you can't just do overnight? And
Right.
say, what if it goes wrong? Let's say if the contract you have with the landlord isn't a good contract.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say if you've not gone for a lawyer, you've just basically downloaded it off the net. And a lot of people really, really tragically do that. And then you end up in a dispute. That's not good. So I want to say this. I know people who do that strategy well, but I think teaching it to newbies and telling them, oh yeah, you're now financially free, isn't right. Basically, it's quite frightening.
So if people are starting their property investment journey, where can they go to for advice or support that is from people like yourself who've got great integrity? That's one of the things that our first meeting, I just thought, this guy has a great integrity, he's got a moral compass, and you were very clear to me saying, look, I know about this area, you're a chartered wealth manager, you talk about broader aspects, but I think it's just, I really respected your professionalism in that regard. But for people watching this who want to explore a little bit more about property investing, where can they go to get some good quality, honest support?
Right. First and foremost, read books on the subject. Look on the Amazon bestsellers list and check their reviews. And in particular, check if the book is actually written by an established landlord. Make sure the book isn't a front to sell a course secretly.
Right.
Also, as well, there's a fantastic networking event I attend to. It's a national networking event. It's called Partners in Property. They have like a code of conduct against people who sell dreams. That's a great networking event to go to because the caliber of people there is really, really high.
Good.
In fact, their founder, Adam Lawrence, is speaking at our next networking event. So I'd recommend that unless you're based in the Torbay area, of course, we can come to the Torbay Property Meet. Also, as well, go to Landlords Association meetings. You will actually meet landlords who've been in the industry for years and years. You'll be able to ask them, what are the pitfalls? And they'll be able to give you genuine advice.
Right.
So and importantly, there is no shortcut. Buying a course is not a sudden shortcut. A lot of very, very big portfolio landlords will back me up, including the guy who's speaking at our next event. There is no shortcut to financial freedom. And really, what is financial freedom? It's a definition. I think I agree with your definition more than the version which involves getting into lots of debt.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a broad issue, and it's something that can be debated, for a good period of time. But our philosophy on it is it's about having an income or having resources around you that allows you to make work optional, and that's the kind of key phrase there. And what I would just encourage everybody who's watching this video, if you'd like to know more about becoming financially free, then speak to Ed, speak to myself, or indeed just find a regulated, qualified financial planner. They will look at the kind of whole broad brush things for you. But property is a real hot topic, and it goes without saying, obviously current market conditions. I've got a number of questions here that I'm sure our viewers are dying to kind of know your thoughts, because I think you've already established your credibility, that you're a good, honest guy, you're well read. I personally respect you. So I've got some thoughts here, really. So I'm just curious, what's your thoughts on the current climate for property and the values and how they're going to be affected over the next 12, 24 months as a result of this, COVID crisis that we're in at the moment? How do you see property values going, Ed?
Sure. Well, according to the Centre for Economics and Business Research, they've actually published a forecast on this.
Right.
Now, they believe throughout 2020, nationwide, there will be an average reduction in value of around 38,000 per property.
Okay.
The area worst affected by this reduction, interestingly, is Yorkshire and East Anglia. Now, that raised a few eyebrows with me because I don't actually know very much about those particular areas. But in those two areas, according to the Centre for Economics and Business Research, values there are going to drop this year by 16.5% alone.
Right.
Now, once the lockdown stops, it's highly likely it's going to become what's known as a buyer's market, i.e. because the values have plummeted,
Sure.
it favours the buyer as opposed to the seller.
Right.
Now, there's a bit of a paradox here. Quite a few mortgage products have been withdrawn, especially those for sort of entry-level people. So the market, in my opinion, and obviously, I want to make this very clear, I'm not regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority, but just going by just an opinion, if you're a cash buyer, for instance, it's very favourable, especially in light of mortgage products for that require, shall we say, less deposits being withdrawn. But ultimately, it's coronavirus. We don't know. I've also done some research about the market recovery as well. According to Savills and Knight Frank, there's going to be a dip this year, which we've just discussed. But then next year, it will start to go to normalise again. But obviously, it's only a prediction. We don't know about coronavirus long term, and we don't know what a long-term effect's going to be. And as you know yourself, in every free market system, there's a recession every 10 years. Last one was obviously the lovely recession of 2008. I graduated from law school that year, Carl. It was an absolutely lovely time. So if you look at it, that's another possibility. There could be an outright recession, but we just don't know.
Sure. And, when I talk about, wealth management, and a lot of people say to me, what's going to happen to the stock market, what's going to happen to this market, the bond market, whatever it may be. And I always say, if you had 10 economists lined up in a row and you asked them all their sort of views as to what will happen over the next year or two, you'd probably get 10 different answers. And the reality of the situation is no one knows, no one has the crystal ball. But for my way of thinking, it's about having a well diversified portfolio, and I include property as part of that overall portfolio. And that's how you mitigate the kind of risks in terms of like investment risk that goes along with that. So obviously there's difficulty in terms of sort of valuing properties at the moment. So is the market dead? Are transactions being done? How can people still sort of buy and sell? Is that still a possibility or not at the moment?
Yes, transactions are still being done. I know a few people who have completed, but these people are more experienced landlords. What's happening a lot is something called delayed completion. That's where you agree a completion date a lot later in the future.
Right.
So yeah, transactions are still going on, but to be honest, a lot of it has been put on hold. And obviously this isn't to be interpreted as formal investing advice. If you are a first-time property investor, just going by my opinion, I would wait till after the lockdown, personally. But obviously consult a professional, of course.
Yeah, because I guess, you can't view properties, can you? And I've heard from mortgage advisors that valuing properties is difficult unless they can do a roadside valuation.
There have been virtual viewings, believe it or not.
Really?
Actually, people who view properties virtually.
Wow. That's using technology to a good advantage, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. I'll give an example, actually. I was having a chat with a landlord friend of mine based in Bristol yesterday, and they actually said that they've actually getting tenants to move into their properties virtually. Yeah, but things are done virtually. I mean, because it's probably fair to say this is what's called a soft lockdown. There are a lot of grey areas here. And one of the grey areas has been classed as, as the whole virtual viewing thing. It's quite a grey thing, but yeah, it's definitely happening.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. So, I mean, how's the current climate impacting on, the commercial investors' plans, bearing in mind, commercial investors, how are they moving forward given the impact to their businesses as a result of what's going on? Are they still being able to, find opportunities, and if so, how? And, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, those that I speak to, a lot of them are doing the finding bit now, with the view to, when the lockdown stops, moving forward, because there's more of, shall we say, there's more room for negotiation.
Okay.
That people are still lending, but obviously you need more equity. As with the buy to let, you need more equity to invest. It goes without saying, it's a much higher risk, isn't it? If you've barely got any equity and you're doing it purely on debt.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So, for want of a better word, Carl, as always, cash is king. And in fact, one well-named landlord writer actually has actually stated cash buyers could actually save the property market potentially, but that's obviously just an opinion.
Yeah, yeah.
I believe she's called Kate Faulkner. I was reading her article the other day.
You are a mine full of knowledge. You really are. Well read, as I say. One of the things somebody put a question to me. I was chatting to somebody the other day, and they were talking about HMOs. So for anybody watching this, that's homes of multiple occupancy where you've got a number of people living in one property. So do you know, Ed, to what extent landlords are responsible for the C19 risks to tenants as a result of living in MHOs?
Okay, I'm not an HMO expert by any means. However, I will say, obviously, those people I know who are HMO landlords have been following the government guidelines on the associated website.
Right.
But also as well, they've been taking extra care with cleanliness on the properties. They've obviously put warning signs about it, hygiene. That's how they've been coping. But obviously, HMO is not my natural field.
Sure. I just thought I'd ask the question because somebody raised it.
And I can direct them, though, to someone I know who'll be able to answer that very well, actually. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate that. And in terms of, demand for rented accommodation, how is that affected by the current market? Is it still there, or is it literally everything on pause for the moment?
Obviously, like, tenants are still moving in. As I mentioned before, people are doing virtual viewings and they're sort of doing things virtually. They're utilising technology. Yeah, there's still demand. If you just have to go on any website like, say, Spare Room, yeah, there's a demand there. But one thing I have found, actually, through talking with some of the bigger landlords, some of them have suffered. The occupancy rate is lower, but
Right.
there is still some limited demand, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move on to things like sort of finance and developments now. Now, development I know is something that's near and dear to your heart. So, can you give us an example of a development that's kind of sort of worked well in the past for you?
Yeah, of course. I'm going to talk a bit about some of the small scale stuff I've done up in Tyne and Wear, where I've basically renovated houses. This is on the small scale end of development. Basically, Newcastle upon Tyne is a fantastic area for property investing. It's very much the Exeter of the Northeast.
Right.
It's very good for capital growth in particular. I purchased a house there several years ago for 90,000. It was actually at the then market value. I spent around 30,000 renovating it. Market value is now about somewhere around 200,000. Well,
Nice.
yeah, bit pre the crisis.
Yeah.
The crisis.
Yeah.
I'll be holding on to that. Believe you me, I'm not going to be selling it straight away.
Yeah.
So that's worked well. And I obviously began investing in development in Ankara, where I put money into a housing cooperative that was building flats on the outskirts of Ankara in Turkey. That worked really well. And actually down in Devon, I'm actually in the process of commencing on something as we speak, where I got planning permission on a site to build a luxury bungalow that had 2 previous refusals.
Right.
And the actual design got featured in the Architects Journal. I can tell you a full-on story about that. If you should want me to.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so in a nutshell, I live in East Devon, which is fairly near Exeter. The demographic is retirement. And I actually moved down to East Devon from Manchester, where I was living at the time, so I could basically commence development on this particular site. Now, the site basically had a very, very bad history. For those that don't know, planning is very much like law. If a site has, for instance, had an instance of someone applying for planning permission,
yeah,
and then it getting refused, that basically sets a precedent where it's very easy to refuse again.
Right.
And to make it worse, one of the refusals was actually at inspectorate level. So that's effectively going a level higher. So it makes it very, very hard. And I thought, do you know what? I'm going to give this a go. So what I did was this. I hired, shall we say, a very creative architect who was very, very good at being outside the box, very good at being creative in terms of thinking ecologically. He made the design eco-friendly so it could tick that box. The site was also on a gradient, well, and is on a gradient, so there were issues with topology. He found a way using modern technology to tick that box. However, there was the local NIMBYs still, and in areas where, shall we say, people have a lot more time on their hands, that becomes very problematic. So initially we had a lot of objections. So I thought, do you know what? I'm going to have to do some diplomacy. So I became a local politician, not literally, but I effectively canvassed everyone and I said, look, why are you objecting? What can I do in the design of this house to make you be a bit more open to it? And I took on board their opinions. We incorporated into the design as much as we reasonably could. But the fact that we listened to them made them a lot less hostile. It's very much like that classic book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, basically. Yeah, so we then lobbied the local politicians. I wrote to all the local town council and said, look, I understand you've got some concerns about this from the residents. Why don't you come to the site? I will walk you around it and I will do a presentation at the town council. So I did. And I also persuaded some residents to write in to support me. And we ended up with more letters of support than we did objections. Because I'd listened to people taking things on board and I showed how it would benefit the community, because as it was a high-end house, it ultimately helps their value go up. Whilst if I was building a shanty town, the value of the area would get degraded. But as it was something a bit more high-end, it was, shall we say, more amiable to the area. So that's how I got the support. But anyway, so I got the support of the town council after giving a presentation. And some of the planners who were hostile thought, do you know what? He's ticked the planning boxes. If the locals like it, we'll do it. So it got allowed on delegated powers, which meant I didn't have to go to a planning committee. And we're in the process of commencing that. And it basically taught me a lot about how to get a development through in front of hostility and the importance of listening to people.
That is absolutely brilliant. And, you know,
in the Architects Journal, I'll send you it.
Yeah, fantastic. That just goes to show the creativity that you got, the resourcefulness. And I was just thinking as you were speaking there about, you know, what a smart move to go and speak to the people who were objecting. And I bet they felt wonderful having been heard and listened to, because often in our minds, we can make stuff up in our minds, which may or may not be the truth. But actually by, you know, you going there, addressing their concerns, you've got people who are engaged in the process, and that's just a really smart move, isn't it, really? So well done you. Great story. Thanks for sharing that, Ed. So
my pleasure.
Turning to finance. So obviously I know from the world of sort of financial planning that lenders are a little bit more strict at the moment in terms of, lending. So, if people are looking to get into the property market over the, weeks and months ahead, what sort of, money, do they need for deposits? What sort of percentage do they need, in terms of if they're getting into properties and investment type of thing?
Okay, it will depend really on how good your broker is, a lot of it. Firstly, I'd recommend going to an independent one who's got access
Sure.
to the full market, not a high street one. I'll
Yeah.
give you some stats first, actually, about that particular thing. During a March, 900 mortgage products got withdrawn from the market, and this was aimed at your sort of entry level investors and buyers. So you will need some equity. I know someone, for instance, who's putting down a 30% deposit so he can get a mortgage. The standard, for instance, in buy-to-let is 25. If you're more experienced, doesn't matter. But if you're sort of entry level, you require a much higher deposit by default. But it will depend on how good your broker is ultimately.
Yes, absolutely. And if people want connections in that regard, we don't do mortgages here within my practice, but I know a number of mortgage advisors across the country. I'm sure, Ed, you do as well. So if people are wanting pointers in the right direction in that regard, then we can absolutely help you in that. Thinking about property, generally, is there anything else that you think we should be discussing?
Yeah. I think it's actually important because I know a lot of your clients will have, shall we say, large properties with a large garden. It's the best piece of advice I could give you. Obviously, consult with a professional, but best piece of advice ever is why not add value to your garden? Why not even build a house in your garden? Reason being, that's what I'm in the process of implementing. If you have a large plot, why not maximize its value?
Right.
Say if it doesn't, like, for instance, have a history of planning refusal and you could fit a small house, why not consider developing it? It'll add value to your land. You could maybe split the title. That's basically, separate the plot that you intend on building on with the main plot. And then you ultimately add a lot of value. Because I'll tell you this, if you get planning permission on a plot, the value goes up tremendously. Like, for instance, in my own case, it was valued initially, the plot at 150,000. I got the permission on it, and it then got valued in the end at 250,000. It can go up by an awful lot.
Right.
So make use of your assets. You might not even view your back garden as a massive asset, but believe you me, it is. Especially if there isn't a bad history on it. And I know for a fact, Carl, a lot of very well-connected people who have had very, very distinguished corporate careers who will be living in a fairly nice house with a big garden. Take advantage of that. I mean, and if not, just extend your house, but there's something called permitted development rights.
Yeah.
Which basically means that you can do extensions without actually going for full-on planning permission. Take advantage of that as well, but that's in certain circumstances, of course.
Okay.
And also as well, look at your street. You might notice that some of the houses are, shall we say, substantially larger than others, and they've obviously been extended. Look for precedent. Think, maybe my neighbour's house is obviously a lot bigger than its initial design. Why not do the same to yours? Because I'll tell you this, if your neighbours, historically been able to do it, in theory, you've got a great local precedent to help you.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Any other top tips?
Yeah. Obviously, get opinions of several people. But if you're a first-time property buyer, wait in the interim, because you're going to have problems getting a mortgage. Goes without saying, if you're a first-time buyer-to-let buyer, wait till it becomes a buyer's market. And also, in particular, if you can sort of afford to hang on to your house, if you want to sell, hang on to it until it's cleared up. Definitely don't sell. Just believe you me, there'll be a lot of people who want it for as cheap as they reasonably can get it. Wait a bit. I definitely will be.
Yeah. Good. Good. And I'm just mindful that obviously a number of people might want to kind of connect with you. You know, some of the stuff that you shared with us today is great. It's authentic. It's honest. And I'm sure people would like to connect with you. If people want to do that, how's the best way for them to link in with you, Ed?
Sure. Okay, they can go to our company's website, www.goldlakedevelopments.com. That is the company we used to source property. It was initially going to be our development company, but it's now more about property sourcing. Alternatively, if they're interested in investing in development, we have a company called Gold Lake Holdings, www.goldlakeholdings.com. There you can connect with myself, my business partners, including John Thomas, who's the MD, former MD of Rolls-Royce.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us on that. I know we could talk for absolutely ages, because I know you've got a huge background in terms of your knowledge on Turkey, and even I'm half German, so even on the discussions of Germany. And I know that we both share some common empathy with people on the front line in the NHS at the moment, because you've got members of the family who are medics, haven't you, who are working there. Do you want to give a shout out for your little promotion that you're doing for the NHS? I noticed on Facebook.
Yeah, of course. Right. Now, Carl can relate to this as well, as he's just mentioned. Both my sister and my brother-in-law are NHS doctors on the coronavirus ward, helping our great country. So we've decided basically to donate half of our ticket sales for our next four-bay property meet, which is on Tuesday, the 12th of May, and it's a virtual meet. We're going to be donating half the tickets to the NHS.
Brilliant. So half the money raised from the tickets is being donated to the NHS. That's fantastic. So
least we can do.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us today. I hope people watching this have found it sort of interesting and informative. And if you'd like to connect with Ed or myself, then obviously I'll be posting this on social media. You've got the website addresses from sort of Ed. I thoroughly recommend that, if you're looking at this type of investing, then having a one-to-one with Ed or his partner, business partner, Mel. They're both great people. It's, they say the power of your, network, is proportionate to your net worth, really. You surround yourself with good people and good things come. So I absolutely recommend Ed as an authority in his field. What I like about him is that he knows his limitations. He doesn't, he's very honest about saying, Carl, I don't know about that particular area, but I know somebody who does. So thanks for sharing your thoughts with us today. It's been great doing so. I really look forward to it, and I hope that people have found it of value. And if you have, please like, comment, or share this video, and hopefully it'll be interesting and informative to other people. Thanks very much. That's me,
Carl. Cheers.
Cheers, Ed.
Cheers.